So, I just started this bizarre job cataloging mannequins at an abandoned department store warehouse, and I think I'm already losing it. The place is massive, rows upon rows of blank faces and lifeless bodies stacked in ways that don't seem physically possible. At first, I thought it would be kind of cool. I'm an art student, so mannequins are great for sketching, but there's something wrong here. For starters, the silence is oppressive, like the warehouse itself is holding its breath. The mannequins? They feel too real. I've already caught myself double-checking to make sure they weren't actually watching me. And one mannequin, in particular, keeps showing up in different places, always facing me, even when I know I didn't leave it that way. It sounds crazy, right? That's what I keep telling myself, too. But today, while I was working, I heard footsteps behind me. Now that you are interested in the story, let me tell it how it all happened from the beginning. Part 1. Title: I got hired to catalog old mannequins at a warehouse, and it's weird. Hey everyone. So, I don't usually post here, but I figured this might be a good place to share something strange that's been happening to me. For context, I'm a college art student, and like most of us, I'm constantly broke. A few weeks ago, I came across this job posting on my school's bulletin board. It was super vague, something about needing help cataloging inventory in an old department store warehouse. The pay wasn't great, but it was flexible hours, and I thought it might be a cool opportunity to sketch in a quiet space between work. When I called, the guy on the phone sounded off. Like, not creepy or anything, just really tired. He asked me if I was okay working in unconventional environments and if I was comfortable being alone for extended periods of time. I figured he was just trying to weed out anyone who might flake, so I said yes. He told me I'd mostly be working with old mannequins, counting them, taking inventory, and writing down descriptions. I thought it sounded easy enough and even joked about how they'd make good models for my sketches. He didn't laugh. Fast forward to my first day. The warehouse is about 20 minutes outside of town, tucked between some old industrial buildings and a scrapyard. It's huge, like airplane hangar huge, and the whole place feels abandoned. There's no sign outside, just this rusted roll-up door that barely works. The guy who hired me, let's call him Mr. Bowman, met me at the entrance. He looked just as tired as he sounded on the phone, like he hadn't slept in days. Bowman gave me a quick tour, but honestly, there wasn't much to see. Just rows and rows of mannequins, some of them stacked like firewood, others propped up in awkward poses. Most of them were the standard glossy department store kind, blank faces, plastic torsos, detachable limbs. But there were others that looked older, handmade even, with features that were way more detailed than they needed to be. One had this weird crack along its face, like a scar. I mentioned it to Bowman, and he just said, "Don't worry about those." The warehouse itself is freezing, even though it's still warm outside, and there's this faint chemical smell, like paint thinner or something. The lights are these old fluorescent tubes that hum constantly, and half of them flicker like they're about to give out. My job is simple: go row by row, write down the number of mannequins, describe their condition, and tag them with these little barcodes. Bowman said the company is thinking about selling them off to prop houses and art schools. Honestly, it's kind of a dream gig for someone like me. I've already filled half a sketchbook just from the first week. But here's the thing, this place is starting to get under my skin. For one, it's too quiet. I know that sounds weird to complain about, but the silence is oppressive. There's no hum of traffic, no birds outside, nothing. Just the buzz of those awful lights and the occasional creak of the building settling. And then there are the mannequins. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but some of them seem off. Like, I'll be working on one row, and when I turn around, a mannequin that was facing one direction will be turned slightly, like it's looking at me. Or their hands will seem higher or lower than I remember. I even convinced myself that maybe Bowman was moving them to mess with me, but I'm alone most of the time. He only pops in for an hour or two in the mornings and leaves me to it. There's this one mannequin I keep seeing that freaks me out more than the rest. I've nicknamed her Grace because she's so detailed. It's like someone tried way too hard to make her look real. Her face has actual contours, like cheekbones and dimples, and her hands have tiny creases, like skin. The first time I saw her, she was sitting on top of a stack of crates with her legs crossed, but yesterday, she was standing upright at the end of a row. I know it's dumb, but I actually said, "Who keeps moving you?" out loud. I laughed at myself afterward, but I swear, for a second, it felt like she was listening. I've started taking pictures of the mannequins while I work, not for evidence or anything, just because they make for great drawing references. I'll post a few if people are interested. Anyway, that's where I'm at. I keep telling myself it's all in my head. Maybe I'm just spooking myself because I'm here alone all day in this creepy place. But every time I think I'm getting used to it, something else weird happens. Like today, I swear I heard footsteps behind me, but when I turned around, no one was there. I'm not ready to quit yet, it's good money, and honestly, I kind of like the challenge of figuring this place out. But I'll admit, I'm starting to feel like I'm not entirely alone in here. Has anyone else ever worked a weird job like this? Am I just psyching myself out? Part 2. Title: The mannequins in the warehouse are moving, and I don't think I'm alone. Hey, it's me again. I didn't expect my last post to get so much attention, but thanks for the comments and theories. Some of you said I might just be imagining things, and I really wish I could believe that. But after the past few days, I'm starting to think something seriously weird is going on. Let me back up. Since my first post, I've been trying to pay closer attention to what's happening in the warehouse. I even started taking pictures of the mannequins at the beginning of my shift, just to keep track of where they are. At first, I thought it would help me prove to myself that nothing is actually moving, that it's all in my head. But now I'm more confused than ever. On Monday, I took a picture of this group of mannequins standing in a cluster near the entrance. Standard, faceless, plastic ones. Nothing special, right? But when I compared the photo to one I took just a few hours later, their positions had shifted. Not dramatically, just small things, like one mannequin's arm being slightly raised or another's head tilting at a different angle. Here's the thing, no one else has been in the warehouse. I'm sure of it. I even asked Bowman about it when he stopped by yesterday morning, and he just shrugged and said, maybe the building's drafty. But there's no draft strong enough to make a mannequin's head turn. And it's not just the movements. I'm starting to notice other things, too. For example, some of the mannequins have these faint scratches on their surfaces, tiny marks that look like they were made by fingernails or claws. I found one with what looked like a handprint smeared across its torso, except it wasn't dust or dirt. It was sticky. Then there's Grace. You remember her, right? The super detailed mannequin I mentioned in my last post. Well, I swear she's showing up in places she shouldn't be. Yesterday, I found her at the back of the warehouse, leaning against a stack of crates like she was posing for a photo. I could have sworn I left her in the middle of the room the day before. I also noticed something new about her, her hands. They're incredibly detailed, with veins and knuckles and even little wrinkles where the joints would bend. I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I actually touched her hand to see what it felt like. It was warm. Not plastic warm, like it had been sitting in the sun or under a lamp, but human warm. I yanked my hand back so fast I almost fell over. Here's the part that really freaked me out. When I turned away to grab my clipboard, I could have sworn I heard something, a faint, creaking sound, like plastic shifting under pressure. I froze and stared at her for what felt like forever, but of course, she didn't move. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching me. At this point, I'm seriously considering quitting. The job pays decently, and I need the money, but I'm not sure it's worth losing my mind over. Some of you mentioned in the comments that this could just be sleep deprivation or stress playing tricks on me. And yeah, I'll admit I've been working late nights on my art portfolio, so maybe that's part of it. But how do you explain the pictures? Or Grace's hand? Anyway, I'll keep you all updated if anything else happens. I'm going to start bringing my sketchbook with me to document the weird stuff I see, so if nothing else, at least I'll have some cool, and creepy, artwork to show for it. Also, a few of you suggested that I should try talking to Bowman about the history of the warehouse. I might do that the next time I see him, though I doubt he'll tell me much. The guy is weirdly tight-lipped about the whole operation. For now, I'm just going to keep my head down and focus on the job. Hopefully, I can finish the cataloging soon and get out of there for good. Let me know what you think. Am I overreacting? Or is this as creepy as it feels to me? Part 3. Title: I found out more about the warehouse, and it's worse than I thought. Hey again. So, I've got an update, and this one's bad. I know some of you were skeptical about my last posts, but I swear everything I'm about to tell you is 100% real. First off, I decided to take your advice and dig into the history of the warehouse. Honestly, I wish I hadn't. After my last shift, I spent hours searching for anything I could find online about this place. It wasn't easy, the warehouse doesn't even have a proper name, just an address. Eventually, I found an old newspaper archive that mentioned it. Turns out, it wasn't always just a storage space for department stores. Back in the 1920s, it was a mannequin factory. The factory was run by a guy named Victor Moreau, a French immigrant who came to the US in the early 1900s. He was apparently a skilled sculptor who became obsessed with creating the perfect mannequins. The articles described him as brilliant but eccentric, which I'm pretty sure is journalist speak for creepy as hell. Here's where it gets weird: Moreau didn't just make mannequins for stores. He saw them as his art, and he insisted on handcrafting every single one. He used some kind of secret method to make them look hyper-realistic, but no one ever figured out exactly how he did it. According to one article, his mannequins were so lifelike that customers would complain about feeling like they were being watched while shopping. The factory shut down in the late 1930s after a fire destroyed most of the building. There were rumors that the fire wasn't an accident, that it was started by one of Moreau's workers after a series of disappearances. Yeah, you read that right. Disappearances. Apparently, a bunch of workers vanished while the factory was still in operation. The official story was that they'd quit and left town, but there were whispers that they'd been killed. People suspected Moreau was involved, but nothing was ever proven. After the fire, he disappeared too. No body was ever found, and no one knows what happened to him. I don't know why, but learning all this has made the warehouse feel heavier. Like, now I'm not just creeped out by the mannequins, I'm afraid of them. Yesterday, I went back for my shift, and everything felt wrong. The air smelled different, like something metallic and rotten. And it was colder than usual, even with my jacket on. I found Grace in a new spot again, of course. She was leaning against one of the rows, her head tilted at this unnatural angle. I tried to ignore her and focus on my work, but every time I turned around, I felt like she'd moved just a little closer. And then there's the locked room. I mentioned in my first post that the warehouse has this door at the back that's always been locked. It looks like a storage room, but Bowman told me not to worry about it when I first started. Yesterday, though, I noticed the door was slightly open, just a crack, like someone had been inside. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I pushed the door open and stepped inside. It's a small room, lined with shelves that are covered in dust. Most of the shelves are empty, but one of them had this big, leather-bound book sitting right in the middle. I thought it was weird, so I picked it up and opened it. It wasn't a book. It was a ledger. The pages were filled with lists of names, dates, and these short notes, things like successful and awaiting completion. Some of the names had been crossed out, and others were underlined. A lot of the dates were from the 1920s and 30s, but there were some more recent ones too. Here's the part that made my stomach drop: I found my last name in the ledger. It wasn't my name specifically, but it was someone in my family. Margaret Fraser, 1926, completed. I don't know who Margaret Fraser is, maybe a distant relative, but seeing my name in there felt like a punch to the gut. I didn't have time to process it because, as soon as I put the ledger down, I heard something. It was this soft, shuffling noise, like fabric dragging against the floor. I turned around, and Grace was standing in the doorway. Standing. Not leaning. Not propped up. Standing. I don't remember running out of the warehouse, but I must have, because the next thing I knew, I was sitting in my car with the engine running. I haven't been back since. I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to quit and never look back, but another part of me feels like I need to figure out what's really going on here. This isn't just about creepy mannequins anymore, it's personal. If anyone has any advice, I'd really appreciate it. Part 4. Title: The mannequins aren't just moving, they're watching me. Hey everyone. It's me again. I wasn't sure if I was going to keep posting, but a lot has happened, and honestly, I need to get this off my chest. I think I've made a huge mistake by going back to the warehouse. After finding the ledger and seeing my family's name in it, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I spent hours trying to figure out who Margaret Fraser might be. I called my mom, my grandma, even some distant relatives. No one recognized the name, which only made it worse. I kept thinking, why is her name there? What does completed even mean? Despite how freaked out I was, I couldn't bring myself to quit. It sounds ridiculous, but I felt like I needed answers, like I couldn't just leave this unfinished. So yesterday, I went back. As soon as I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The air was heavy, like walking into a room where someone had just been yelling. And the mannequins, they weren't where I'd left them. The clusters were scattered, the rows broken up. It was like someone had walked through the place overnight, shoving them aside, leaving them in strange, unnatural positions. One mannequin was face down on the floor, its limbs bent at impossible angles. But the worst part was Grace. She was standing in the middle of the warehouse, directly under one of the flickering lights. Her head was tilted back, her face turned toward the ceiling, and her arms were stretched out, palms up, like she was waiting for something. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at her, but it felt like forever. Eventually, I forced myself to move. I told myself it was all in my head, that the mannequins weren't alive, that someone must have broken in. I grabbed my clipboard and tried to focus on the cataloging. It didn't work. I kept hearing things, small, subtle noises that I couldn't pinpoint. A creak here. A shuffle there. Once, I thought I heard someone whispering my name, but when I turned around, there was nothing. Then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. On the back wall of the warehouse, behind one of the rows, was a huge, floor-to-ceiling mirror. It was covered in grime and dust, like it hadn't been cleaned in decades. I don't know how I missed it before, but when I saw my reflection in it, I froze. The mannequins in the mirror weren't where they were supposed to be. In the reflection, Grace wasn't under the light anymore, she was behind me, just a few feet away. My heart nearly stopped. I whipped around, but she hadn't moved. She was still under the light, her arms outstretched. But when I turned back to the mirror, she was closer. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I walked up to the mirror. My reflection looked normal, but the mannequins didn't. They were all closer, all facing me, even though in reality, they hadn't moved. It was like the mirror was showing me something that hadn't happened yet. That's when I saw it. There was a mannequin in the mirror that wasn't in the warehouse. It was standing right behind me, so close I should have been able to feel it. Its face was wrong. Too human. Its features were twisted, like someone had tried to carve a smile into its mouth but hadn't bothered to make it even. Its eyes were wide open and glassy, but they felt alive. I bolted. I didn't even grab my bag. I just ran straight for the door. But when I reached it, it wouldn't open. The lock was stuck, like something was holding it shut. I could hear footsteps behind me, heavy, deliberate footsteps, and I knew I didn't want to see what was making them. I started screaming and banging on the door, and just when I thought I was trapped for good, it swung open. I fell out into the sunlight, shaking so hard I could barely stand. I didn't go home right away. I just sat in my car in the parking lot, staring at the warehouse, trying to convince myself that what I saw wasn't real. But the more I think about it, the more I know I'm lying to myself. The mannequins aren't just moving, they're watching me. I don't know what to do. I can't go back there, but I feel like if I don't figure this out, it's going to follow me. Maybe it already has. Please, if anyone has any advice, or if you know anything about Victor Moreau or this warehouse, let me know. I feel like I'm in way over my head. Part 5. Title: I tried to destroy one of the mannequins, and now I'm being followed. Hey everyone. I wasn't planning to go back to the warehouse, but I did. Before you say anything, I know it was stupid. But I couldn't let it go. Every time I tried to convince myself to quit, I kept thinking about the ledger, about Margaret Fraser, about the mirror. I needed answers. So, I went back this morning, telling myself it would be the last time. I even brought a hammer with me. Part of me thought I might need to defend myself, but honestly, I think I just wanted to feel less helpless. The warehouse looked the same as before, cold, silent, and full of shadows. But when I walked in, I noticed something new. There were footprints in the dust. Not shoe prints, though, bare feet. They led from the door straight to the center of the room, where Grace was waiting. She wasn't under the light anymore. This time, she was standing near the mirror, her head turned slightly, as if she'd been watching me walk in. Her arms were down, her hands open like she was inviting me to come closer. I almost turned around and left right then and there. But I told myself I couldn't keep running. Whatever was happening, I needed to face it. So, I walked up to Grace, gripping the hammer so tightly my knuckles turned white. I don't know what you are, I said out loud. But I'm not scared of you. That was a lie, by the way. I was terrified. I raised the hammer and brought it down on her shoulder as hard as I could. For a second, I thought it had worked. The sound of plastic cracking echoed through the warehouse, and her arm fell to the floor. But when I looked closer, I realized it wasn't just plastic. The inside of her arm wasn't hollow. It was filled with this dark, tar-like substance that oozed out and dripped onto the floor. It smelled awful, like burnt hair and something metallic. I gagged and stumbled back, nearly dropping the hammer. And that's when I heard it. It started as a soft creaking sound, like wood bending under pressure. Then came the footsteps. They were slow at first, deliberate, and they seemed to be coming from all around me. I looked up, and my heart stopped. The mannequins were moving. Not all at once, and not smoothly, they moved in short, jerky bursts, like stop-motion puppets. One turned its head toward me. Another raised its arm, the joints grinding like rusty hinges. They were all watching me, their blank faces tilted in my direction. Grace was the worst. Her head turned to face me, even though her body stayed perfectly still. Her eyes, those smooth, glassy, lifeless eyes, seemed to glint in the dim light, like they were alive. I don't know how I managed to move, but I bolted for the door. The mannequins didn't run after me, but I could hear them, plastic feet scraping against the concrete floor, their movements growing faster and faster. The door was stuck again, just like before. I was screaming, banging on it with the hammer, but it wouldn't budge. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw Grace start to move. She didn't walk, she lurched. Her body twisted unnaturally, her legs bending at strange angles, her broken arm dangling by her side. She was getting closer. Finally, the door gave way, and I tumbled outside into the daylight. I didn't stop running until I was in my car with the doors locked and the engine running. But here's the thing, I don't think I escaped. On my way home, I kept seeing things in my rearview mirror, shapes that didn't belong. At one point, I could have sworn I saw Grace sitting in the back seat. When I whipped around, there was nothing there. I made it home, but the feeling hasn't gone away. Every time I close my eyes, I see them, those blank faces, those twisted limbs. And I'm not imagining it, because just now, I heard something outside my apartment. It sounded like plastic scraping against the sidewalk. I looked out the window, and I swear I saw something standing under the streetlight across the street. It was just a silhouette, but it was tall, with arms that seemed too long and a head that was tilted at an unnatural angle. It didn't move. It just stood there, watching me. I'm keeping all the lights on tonight, but I don't think it'll help. I have no idea what I've gotten myself into, but I think I made it angry. If anyone has advice, anything at all, please let me know. I don't think this is over. Part 6. Title: The Mannequins Are Following Me, and I Found Out Why. Hey everyone. I didn't post yesterday because I've been trying to piece together what's happening, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to know the answer anymore. Things are escalating. First, let me say this, the mannequins are not staying at the warehouse. They're showing up near my apartment. Yesterday morning, I found a small, human-shaped smudge on the window of my living room. It was faint, like someone with greasy fingers had pressed their hands and face against the glass. The smudge was too tall to be a regular person, though, at least 7 feet up, way higher than where someone would normally press their face. I tried to tell myself it was a prank or just a weird shadow, but then I saw them. When I left for class, there were 3 mannequins standing in the alley across the street. They weren't there when I walked out the door, but by the time I got to my car, I turned around, and they were just there. They were standing perfectly still, but I could feel them watching me. I thought about calling the police, but what was I supposed to say? Help, a bunch of mannequins are following me. So, I did the only thing I could think of, I got in my car and drove to campus, hoping they wouldn't follow. I think they did, though. While I was in class, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I glanced out the window, I'd catch a glimpse of something, a pale face, a figure in the distance, but when I looked again, it was gone. Even my professor noticed I wasn't paying attention, but how was I supposed to focus when I was constantly looking over my shoulder? When I got home that night, I finally decided to go through the ledger I found at the warehouse. I've been too scared to touch it since I brought it back with me, but I figured it was my best shot at finding some answers. The names in the book are more than just a list. They're a record. Next to each name is a series of strange symbols, patterns that almost look like runes or sigils. Some are scratched out, while others are circled. And the dates? They aren't random. They match up with the years people have gone missing in this area. I don't know why, but the names seem to stop around 1980. After that, there's a gap, and then, my family's name shows up. Margaret Fraser, 1926, completed. And underneath it, my name, Lisa Fraser, 2023, in progress. I wish I could tell you I'm making this up, but I'm staring at the page as I type this. My hands are shaking so badly I can barely hold my phone. I think I'm being marked. But here's the part that makes me sick. There's a note in the margin next to my name, written in this messy, frantic handwriting. It says, "She has the artist's blood." I don't know what that means, but it feels like everything is connected, Victor Moreau, the mannequins, my family. It's like I was brought to the warehouse for a reason. One more thing, the ledger has a sketch in the back. It's a drawing of a mannequin, but it doesn't look like the ones at the warehouse. This one has a face, my face. I can't do this anymore. I don't care about the money. I'm quitting the job tomorrow. But I don't think it's going to matter. When I came home tonight, there was a mannequin standing in the middle of my living room. It was Grace. Her broken arm was still dangling at her side, and her face was turned toward me, her mouth twisted into that awful, fake smile. I don't know how she got inside. I don't know how to make her leave. I'm sitting in my bedroom with the door locked, but I can hear her out there, shuffling around. I'm scared to open the door, but I'm more scared of what will happen if I don't. I think they want to take me back to the warehouse. If anyone has advice, please, tell me what to do. Part 7. Title: I know what the mannequins want, and I can't escape. Hey everyone. This might be my last post. I don't know how much time I have left. After I locked myself in my room last night, I could hear Grace moving around outside my door. The shuffling didn't stop for hours. It wasn't just her, though, there were others. I could hear them bumping into furniture, their plastic feet scraping across the floor. At some point, the noises stopped, and I thought maybe they'd left. I finally worked up the courage to peek out into the living room. They hadn't left. They were everywhere. Grace was standing by the couch, but there were others I'd never seen before, mannequins with cracked faces, missing limbs, and warped bodies. They were scattered around my apartment like a crowd frozen mid-motion, all facing the door to my bedroom. I slammed the door shut and spent the rest of the night curled up in the corner, too afraid to sleep. When the sun came up, they were gone. At least, I think they were. I didn't stick around to check, I just grabbed my car keys and left. I've been driving around all day, trying to figure out what to do. But no matter where I go, I can't shake the feeling that I'm being followed. And I think I know why. I went back through the ledger this morning. It's not just a list of victims, it's a record of how Moreau created his mannequins. The names, the dates, the runes, it's all part of some kind of ritual. Moreau didn't just make mannequins. He used them to trap people's souls. The process starts with marking the victim, just like the note next to my name says. The runes are what bind the person to the mannequin. Once the ritual is complete, the mannequin becomes a permanent vessel, and the person's soul is gone. I think that's what they're trying to do to me. The ledger mentions something about the artist's blood, which must be why they're targeting me. Maybe it's because I'm an art student. Maybe it's because of some connection to my family. Either way, they've been preparing for this for a long time. But here's the part that really terrifies me: once someone is marked, they can't escape. The mannequins will follow them wherever they go. I tried to run, but it didn't work. When I stopped at a gas station earlier, I saw them in the parking lot. At first, it was just Grace, standing near the pumps. Then more of them appeared, one by the dumpsters, another by the store entrance. They didn't move, but I knew they were waiting for me. I drove away as fast as I could, but they keep showing up. Every time I stop, there's more of them. I don't think I can keep running. I'm going back to the warehouse. It feels like the only way to end this. If they're tied to that place, maybe I can destroy whatever's keeping them alive. I don't know if it'll work, but I have to try. I've packed a bag with anything I could think of: flashlights, matches, a crowbar. I'm posting this now in case I don't make it out. If something happens to me, I want people to know what's really going on at that warehouse. Thank you to everyone who's been following this. Your comments and support have helped me stay sane. I'll update you if I can. Wish me luck. Part 8. Hi. This is Lisa. If you're reading this, I managed to make it out alive. But it's not over. Not really. I don't even know how to begin explaining what happened last night, but I'll try. I went back to the warehouse. I drove there just before sunset, thinking if I had any chance of surviving, I needed to see what they wanted before it got too dark. The place looked the same, silent, empty, but as soon as I stepped inside, I knew they were waiting for me. The mannequins were everywhere. Rows of them filled the aisles, but they weren't standing where I'd seen them before. They were scattered haphazardly, as if they'd been in motion and froze the moment I opened the door. Grace was at the front of the group, her broken arm hanging limply, her head tilted toward me like she was welcoming me home. I told myself I was ready for this, but when the door slammed shut behind me, my resolve cracked. I heard the lock click, and I knew I wasn't getting out the way I came. I forced myself to keep walking, deeper into the warehouse, toward the mirror on the back wall. The mannequins didn't move, but I felt their presence pressing in around me. I swear I could hear faint whispers, my name, repeated over and over, growing louder with each step. When I reached the mirror, I saw something I wasn't prepared for. It wasn't just my reflection staring back at me. Behind me, the mannequins were moving. Their heads were turning. Their arms were twitching. In the reflection, Grace was already standing right behind me, even though when I turned around, she was still halfway across the room. I started screaming at them. I don't even remember what I said, something about how I wasn't afraid, how I wasn't going to let them win. But the truth was, I was terrified. Then the mirror changed. The glass rippled, like water, and for a moment, I saw something else. A figure. Tall, gaunt, with hollow eyes and a twisted smile that stretched too far across its face. It wasn't a mannequin, it was Victor Moreau. He spoke to me. "You are my finest work," he said, his voice smooth and calm, like he was talking to an old friend. "Your blood has completed the circle. Now, give yourself to me." I don't know where I found the strength, but I smashed the mirror with the crowbar I brought. The glass shattered, and for a second, the entire warehouse went silent. Then all hell broke loose. The mannequins started moving, really moving. They were jerking toward me, their limbs snapping and bending in unnatural ways. Grace was the fastest. She was on me before I could run, her good arm clawing at my face. I fought back as hard as I could, swinging the crowbar wildly. I managed to knock her off me, but the others were closing in. That's when I remembered the matches. I pulled them from my bag and struck one, lighting the small bottle of lighter fluid I'd brought with me. I didn't think about what I was doing, I just threw it at the nearest group of mannequins. The flames spread fast. The old, dry warehouse lit up like it had been waiting to burn. The mannequins didn't scream, but the sound of their plastic bodies melting was worse. It was like a chorus of creaking and popping, growing louder as the fire consumed them. I don't remember how I got out. The next thing I knew, I was outside, gasping for air as smoke poured from the building. The fire department showed up eventually, but by the time they put it out, the warehouse was gone. They asked me a lot of questions, but I told them I didn't know anything. The police think it was an accident. But I know better. I should feel relieved, but I don't. The mannequins may be gone, but I can still feel them. When I close my eyes, I see Grace's face. I hear Moreau's voice, telling me it isn't over. And this morning, when I woke up, there was a single shard of glass on my nightstand. It's from the mirror. I don't know what that means, but I'm afraid to find out. Thank you to everyone who's followed my story. If anything else happens, I'll post again. But for now, I think I need to leave town. Thank you for watching this story to the end. Subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with new stories. I also look forward to your comments, criticisms and suggestions below this video.